Good morning. It's Joe Romero, your Subaru Added Security and Equity Shield product partner for the Portland and Denver zones. Like I promised you last week, I have a special guest today, Lloyd Trushel, the author of the book we talked about last week, The Art of F&I. Thanks for joining us today, Lloyd.
Thanks for having me.
So, a couple of things that I wanted to get to, and a lot of times my people are looking for a little more information from an expert. You know, we wanted to call these things that we do pro tips. I'm looking for some pro tips on a couple of things. And, you know, I read your book. I really believe in what it says, but a lot of the F&I managers still have to follow a process. There's still an interview process they have to do. There's still a menu. There's still overcoming objections. And I know that, you know, the book isn't really about overcoming objections and word tracks. But if we start off with an F&I manager that has to do an interview, what are some of your best practices for an interview? And what are some good questions that they can ask to build trust with their customers?
Well, one of the things that I want to do in the very beginning when I'm introducing myself to the customer is I thank them. That's the first thing I start doing, is I thank them. There are hundreds of other dealerships that you could have went to, but you chose us. I appreciate it. It comes from the heart every single time. Then I want to start having a conversation with them about why they're trading their car in. Because if their car that they're trading in has become difficult or challenging, or they've had problems with it, or they just don't like it anymore, they're moving away from something that they're finding, let's say, painful. If it's the other way, it's a reward or something where they like the convenience or the other parts of that vehicle that are maybe a little more prestigious or more comfort, or just to kind of make themselves happy, then they're moving towards gain. And that's not important during the interview, but it might be important later on whenever I'm trying to make sense out of how I can structure their loan with a certain amount of products that are going to benefit what they're trying to accomplish.
Okay, so you really want to find out their buying motives without asking them what their buying motives are.
Yeah, I kind of am, but I want to try and keep it conversational. You know, I mean, ultimately, if I start saying, you know, well, how long do you plan on keeping the car and how many miles a year are you going to drive? You know, for some people, they know instantly where we're going. You know
Absolutely.
what I'm saying? And honestly, most of the time, and I was taught to do that too, most of the time when I ask people that, they go, I don't know. You know, I mean, how many times have you heard that? You sit across the wall, how many miles are you going to drive? I don't know. And you can be deductive by trying to take it from the trade information, but then sometimes we don't know if the customer bought that car new or not. You know, so there's a lot of mathematics, and it can get kind of convoluted. If instead I'm staying kind of on why they're moving from that car to this car, there's a lot of information in there. And if I'm willing to just slow down and have a conversation with them, they can kind of unpack it for me. And the other thing is, people like to talk about themselves. So sometimes when we're talking about that, you know, well, I got a raise at work, or, you know, I wanted something with Bluetooth now, or whatever it is, you know, allowing them to express that to me. And I'm listening. I've got my listening ears on them. I'm not trying to sell them. I'm not trying to set them up. I'm not trying to get the aha, you told me moment later on. No, I just want to understand. I just want to understand their buying motivation.
So that, and I like that, because I hate you know, we've always said, you told me is the magic word, but I don't like to use someone's words against them in that type of way. But one of the favorite questions that I ask in the interview is, when I come out and introduce myself, I like to say, you know, what's the occasion and who's the lucky driver? And that leads to a conversation, because they do want to talk about themselves. They'll either tell me that, you know, the last car was in the shop and they need to replace it. This is for my daughter, she's going to college, or it leads to a conversation as opposed to an interrogation.
No, that's a great way to do it too. I mean, again, it's looking at it like, I'm going to create a great experience for you, Mr. Customer. That's like at your core. You have to get your intent centered on that in the beginning. We're focused on selling products the whole time. And that focus comes from, you know, guys like you and me talking to F&I managers going, what are your numbers? That focus comes from your GM going, what are your numbers? That focus comes from your wife or your husband going, you know, what's your paycheck look like? And that comes down to the numbers. And there's all this time that we're focused on that. And all the time that we're focused on that, we're not focused on the people in front of us. We need to take, and we don't have to do it for the entire transaction. I mean, I'm still a car guy. I still recognize I need to make money. But at a certain point, I have to be completely focused on my customer and give them this really good experience. You know, you think about going to any kind of, like, think of a fancy restaurant. You go in and everybody's like, hi, what brings you in tonight? Is it a special occasion, et cetera, et cetera. It's the same thing. You're not going to get that whenever you walk into Panera Bread. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
They're spending $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 with us. Slow down, engage. Demonstrate that you actually care about them. Don't think about your products or your penetration, your PVR, or anything right now. Don't. You can think about that later on. Think about it after, compartmentalize that until after the transaction's done. But in the time that you're with them, whether they're buying product or not from you, be completely invested in giving them a first-class experience. It's meaningful. And even if they don't buy anything from you today, sometimes we strike out, everybody does. Even if they don't buy anything today, you still want to leave the reputation of the dealership in really high standing. If you ran into that customer 3 months later at the grocery store and they saw you and you saw them, hopefully you will have left feelings of mutual respect. You know what I'm saying? You did something and you represented your store as a professional regardless. But when we represent ourselves like that, it makes it a heck of a lot easier to sell product. So it's twofold. You know, if I'm thinking about creating the best experience for them the whole time, then when I pull out a menu and we start having that conversation, I'm still thinking about creating the best experience for them. It just translates from the closing or their experience in the dealership to their ownership experience. I'm just moving into a different arena, but it's still with the same intent.
So that leads me to the next question, and since you brought it up, you talked about a menu. And a lot of finance managers, trying to do the right thing, they go out and do a really good interview and build rapport, but then they don't know what to do when they get to present the menu. It's still a clunky experience that is still selling. What best practices do you have for introducing the menu? When do you introduce the menu? And how do you talk about your products?
So I introduce a menu probably like almost anybody does. I'm going to go through some of my non-revenue generating paperwork. And then I'll pull up the menu and go, all right, I'm going to go over some options with you. You know, I'll introduce it that way. What is probably quintessentially different of what I would do than like a lot of people are taught to do is if I have a customer that pushes the menu back at me and they go, no, there's two things that I'm looking at right there. Number one, did they actually look at what I'm presenting first? If they didn't look at it, then I know that I have a trust problem. Like, you don't care what's on this menu. Be the best service contract in the world. It's a 10-year, million-mile contract and only raises your payment $9 a month. Pretty much anybody's going to buy that, right? But the customer didn't even look at it. So they're not saying no to the menu. They're saying no to me. You know, or they're saying no to the dealership or something along that line. Or maybe salespeople in general because they had a bad experience at some point. Okay. If they do pick it up and they start looking at it, it's a little bit different. Now they're gathering some information. But if they say no without gathering information, I know I have a trust problem. If they say no after gathering some information, then maybe I have a budget problem or something, but it's a little bit different. If they say no right away, a lot of times I don't want to try and tackle trust and I don't want to try and tackle budget right away, and I definitely don't want to say the car's going to break. The salesperson just told them how great it was. You know, we went through that. I will slide the menu off to the side and continue with my other paperwork. I'll leave it there. Most of the time, the customers will lean forward and start looking at it on their own because the fact that I didn't keep pushing took the pressure off. And what happens is when people start feeling pressure and stress, there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala controls fight or flight in your brain. If that gets triggered, lack of trust is going to trigger it. If that gets triggered, people are going to start figuring out whether they want to try and get out of here or if they're going to go ahead and argue with you. So the argument looks like, no, I never buy any of that stuff, don't waste your time. I said no. Okay, that's what a fight looks like. I mean, they don't put their dukes up or anything, but that's how they do it. On the other hand, if they say things like, well, do we have to make a decision right now? Do we have to buy it today? Can I think about it? You know, that's running, that's flight. I want to get out of here without all this pressure. I am feeling pressure, it's making me stress. Can I think about it? Okay, no problem. Slide over here, there's no stress. Stress levels start going down. And then they remember the one thing that's truly important to them, that they actually want coverage on that car. There isn't anybody that comes in that buys a vehicle from you that doesn't want the longest warranty available. They may not want to spend the money, but they want coverage. So would you rather have a 3-year warranty or a 10-year warranty? Same cost. Everybody's going to want it.
Everyone's
All
going
right.
to want 10.
So you want a 3-year warranty or a 10-year warranty, and it's going to go up a couple dollars. Everybody's going to want it. Almost everybody's going to want it, unless they have a trust issue. At a certain percentage, people start dropping off, but they all still want that coverage. I know that going in. So, all right, I didn't get you on the first attempt with the menu. Not a problem. It's right over here. See if you come back to it. You know. But the other thing is, we were talking about before, is that I don't put Gap on my menu. I still have Gap in my back pocket, so if the customer is really reluctant on everything, I still have one talking point waiting in the wings. You know what I mean? And it's not associated with the car, it's associated with the loan, so I feel comfortable differentiating it that way.
So just let me ask you this question. So your customer says no, you pull it off to the side, but you do want to reintroduce that menu at some point. You want to reintroduce the product, the service contract, whatever. Is there a best practice that you have to come back to the products that are on the menu? Not necessarily the menu, but to the products that are on the menu.
So it varies. It depends on what I have. So the customer that says no without looking at it, yeah, I'm going to try and reintroduce that. I want to try and figure out how to build communication. I'm not trying to close them. I just want to get them talking with me. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm not going to go from no to closed. That I don't know anybody that gets that process where you just turn around and go, but the car might break. The customer goes, oh, you're right. And they don't do that. What I want to do is start engaging in a little bit of a dialogue with them and say, look, I understand that you don't want a warranty. That I get that. Or maybe it's an extended warranty or service contract rather. But, and I've had success saying this with people anyway, where you go, look, you spent a few weeks trying to make a decision on your car, right? You got some data, you got the facts and the figures and the stats, and you came to a decision that this is the right car at the right price, right? Yeah, okay. I'm not saying that you need a service contract. I'm not saying that at all. What I am saying is that it's probably worth it to take a look at what we have to offer so that you can be informed. So you're not saying no to something that you haven't actually looked at in the same way you do with your car. I buy them. I put them on my car. Would you like to know why? Because again, I'm trying to bring the conversation back over to me. Talking about one bad day in the shop is going to have a certain amount of success with a certain amount of your clientele, no doubt. 99.9% of the time, if your car's in the shop, it's going to be X amount of repairs or X amount of things that fail and 8 hours in a day, etc. You can do the math and you can take people on that ride. Some people will do it. But what is more convincing than that is when you can reach into yourself personally and you can tell the stories that you've had on your own, claims that you've had with your own car, why you buy the products yourself, because you're speaking from a position of belief. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, so, and you kind of already hit it on that. We've talked about an interview, we've talked about how do you present the menu, and you've already hit on the closes. And I'll tell you that my boss at Subaru, if we start giving him a bunch of different closes, he hates them. He doesn't want to hear the next stapler close or the next iPhone close or whatever it is. But we still have to sell products. Mm-hmm. So, I believe the same way you do. It's about product knowledge and personal stories. If you know and can trust that your products are going to do what you say they're going to do, that belief is going to come across to your customer.
And it's the stapler close in itself. When you look at the ease of that, okay, it's less about a close and it's more about trying to unpack an idea for the customer. Hey, the engine and transmission are relatively set in stone the way that they operate, like the stapler. They're going to perform all the time. The iPhone, on the other hand, or your smartphone, is like the electronics on the phone. It's not a bad idea to use something like that as an explanation to help somebody kind of comprehend the difference between the engine and transmission and the electronics. It's a pretty good idea, actually. Some people get it. But again, when you're using something to try and close the customer, it's a lot harder because people feel that you're trying to do it for that purpose. If you're trying to do it just for understanding so that they can come to that conclusion themselves, it feels different. Same words, same process, but the whole thing feels entirely different. You know where I'm going?
I do, and because that's the difference. If we're doing it to help them understand and help them understand what the product does and it's going to do what we say it's going to do, Or if we're doing it because I need to get this sale, I'm going to reduce the price, I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to go into my bag of closes and give you whatever I have because I need to sell this. They can feel the difference.
They do feel the difference. And in certain circumstances, if people feel that, it doesn't turn them off. But a lot of people it does. And so the idea that if you have a set process that you do the same thing every single time, but you're going to touch 70 deals a month, you're going to have 70 very different customers that walk in here from all different walks of life, all different jobs, all different experiences with cars, all different experiences with salespeople. And probably the most important thing that you need to do, in my opinion, is differentiate yourself from being just another salesperson. And the way that you do that is demonstrate that you care about them. The way that you do that is slow down a little bit in the beginning, thank them for the purchase, talk to them about what's important for them. And then later on, when you're having the dialogue with them, you're not doing it with an I told you so position. You're doing it with it that, hey, you shared with me what was important to you. This is where we're going here. It needs to feel different. But the only way it's truly going to feel different, and this is the most counterintuitive thing I can share with anybody, is you actually have to let go of the outcome. You have to let go of the outcome. When the customer goes, nah, and you slide off to the side, you might know that you're not going to reintroduce it again. It may not come up again. And that's a very hard thing to do. But if the customer that says no and pushes it back without looking at it, you have a trust issue in the first place. The only way you're going to get some trust from them is by letting go of the outcome, because they're dictating the outcome right now.
I completely agree. If they ignore it at the very beginning, it's a trust issue. The problem that a lot of F&I managers have is the customer that looks at it and says no, and now they're like, I got to get something. They got to, and that's where one of my colleagues has said, hey, the best way to overcome an objection is to not get it in the first place.
I totally agree with that.
If you've done your job at the very beginning and you've built real trust and you've done what you should do, you're not going to get that many that turn it down. And I don't want to interrupt you, but the thing is that you have to let go of the outcome, because if you aren't okay with a no, you're going to drive yourself crazy in this job.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter, like the cost versus value equation. If the customer's picked up the menu and they go, all right, well, it's not worth $35 a month for a warranty. No, they're making that cost versus value equation. If they get there, that's okay. I can start having I might even use a stapler conversation, not stapler close. I'm not trying to do that necessarily, but more likely than anything else, I'm not going to use a close at all. And I'm going to tell the experiences that I've had. Like, hey, this is what happened to me when I went in for my O2 sensor. This is what happened to me when I went in for my strut. This is why I buy service contracts on my car. I'm not saying you need to do it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm only saying that you should take a look at the price and the coverage and make an informed, intelligent decision for yourself. I want to try and empathize with the customer. I want to try them and draw them into the place where they trust me and they feel comfortable with me. And that all starts in the first couple of seconds whenever I'm doing my greeting with them. I don't want to call it an interview necessarily, because ultimately I'm just trying to have a conversation and learn who they are. Not how many miles do you drive a year and how long do you want to keep the car. I know where I'm going with that dialogue, and so do they most of the time.
They absolutely do, and that's been one of the conversations that I've had with other of my colleagues is they know you're trying to sell them something. You've got to be better than that.
They do, and this is going to sound, again, like, I don't want to say counterintuitive, but a lot of finance managers, they don't want this, but it will make you more money. And that is when you're sitting with people, decide that they're going to be friends with you if it comes to that. This relationship might only be 30 or 45 minutes, but it might also be the next 10 or 15 years. I've had customers that have been professional photographers, web designers, I've had advertising executives, I've had CEOs before, and I've done the transaction and they're still on my cell phone now, and we still occasionally email and we Facebook each other. It doesn't end in 30 or 45 minutes. I'm in this for the long haul. When I see them at the grocery store, I want to be, hey, how are you doing? How's the car running? I want that bond, and I'm going to try and create that bond with everybody that comes in. I don't, if after the fact, 2 years later, the phone rings. Like, hey, I totaled my car, Gap. Come on in, bring your paperwork. I'll help you put this together. I'm going to walk them through the process because I know how to do it. It just adds value the whole time. If the relationship is only 30 or 45 minutes for an hour, I don't care about their claims. But you have to care about their claims. You have to care about the entire experience. Even if you're not making money on it at that time, you still have to care about the customer. You know, when you get in touch with that, that is what people will feel, and then they will extend trust to you.
And you said it in the book, no trust, no sale. If you get trust, you're not going to have to worry about knowing all the word tracks, knowing all the closes. You're naturally going to sell more products.
I don't. Like, I'm familiar with stable close. I might use that to explain the difference between the transmission and the electronics. I think it's a pretty elegant way of explaining it to people. But yeah, I don't have any one bad day in the shop, 99.9% closes in my back pocket that I'm reaching for. I am just telling my experience. That's it. You know, and if you don't have experiences, like you're the F&I guy that leases a car every 3 years and you haven't had a breakdown since you were a teenager or whatever, that's fine. Go back to the service department, find out what's getting repaired, what it costs, dig in. You know, the more you have up here, the more credible you are. The more in touch you are with trying to create the relationship, the more trust you'll build. When you put those two together, man, it gets a lot easier. And you don't actually have to think about, what am I going to say if they say this? Nah, it just flows.
That's the hardest part of this job, is trying to think, what do I say if they say this? Trying to remember which word track comes next. When you can do it naturally, this job is so much easier.
No, and that's the other thing too. We get so wound up on the word no. And we're so greedy to hear the word yes. And so if we hear no, we panic. If we don't hear yes, we're addicted to yes. We want to hear yes. And we don't hear that, we start kind of going, oh, well, how am I going to move them here or there? Relax, man. If you believe in what you're doing, if you believe that your products add benefit to people, and you're trying to genuinely create a relationship with people, you actually care about their entire experience, you just do it naturally. You can do it naturally. You can have a conversation, and it doesn't have to sound manipulative or scripted, or you're not following a path to get somebody there. You just be authentic.
Look, I really wanted to have you on today because I believe exactly what you're saying. This is the way I've been training for some time. Those of you out there that have seen my training or sat with me know that this is what I preach. But I wanted someone else, you know, the pro, to come in and kind of give some of those tips. So I really, really appreciate you coming out here today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you.